section as we discuss events that have been happening in Rwanda, specifically the 15th National Annual Retreat. What were some of the key resolutions that were taken? What new challenges have we set for ourselves as a country to reach? This and more is what we'll be agreeing and disagreeing to on The Square. I'm joined, as always, by my lovely co-hosts. On my right is Charles. Charles, welcome to The Square.
Good evening and thank you, Diana.
Bernard Namata is also part of The Square.
It's a privilege, thank you.
And Ephraim Ramende is also part of The Square. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is The Square. But before we get into the thick of things, last week was a very eventful one. There were a couple of activities that took place. What was your take on these activities? What were your key takeaways?
I remember Miss Rwanda.
You remember Miss
Of
Rwanda?
course.
That's it.
No, obviously.
Did you attend it? Did you actually go?
No, unfortunately.
Did you watch it from your TV?
I watched it on Twitter.
Yeah, I watched it on Twitter as well.
Yeah, but I was a bit busy, but I got a chance to glimpse a couple of Miss Rwanda always entertains us.
Yeah. Talking about Miss Rwanda, a few years ago, I think the inaugural one, I stand to be corrected, 2014 or 15 thereabouts, or 13, I stand to be corrected. I had the privilege of hosting Miss Rwanda. And for those of you who didn't know, I actually did.
Wow.
And every year that goes by, I see an improvement. And when I see people lashing out at the pageants, I'm really sympathetic because they do not realize how far back we've gone. You know, when at that time, I remember how tough it was to go backstage and actually encourage these girls and tell them you can do it, you can actually walk, you can actually hold a mic and talk to many people. And today to see that they even actually go through regional auditions that end up into a national pageant, it's very impressive. So I think the stick that the public has against these girls should be more lenient.
I think this year, not to dwell on Miss Rwanda because that's not our topic for today, but I think this year the last shot I saw was at Koje Bank.
Oh, yeah. The advertising, hogging the advertising space.
Yeah.
Berna, how was your week?
I'm definitely taking a whole different view of Miss Rwanda. My personal view is in 2018, in Rwanda, we shouldn't be having beauty pageants. Now,
That's
I know
extreme.
that, yes, I know that the organizers try to sanitize it with brain and culture, but if you take a critical look at the event, it's actually not as culture or as brainy, you know. And the reason I say that is because you still have people that are, young girls that are judged on largely how they look like. And for me, I have a problem with that. And when you talk about culture, I don't see anything cultural apart from saying, oh, we have the arts behind and we have, a few performances. What is actually culture about that event? Anyway, that's a topic for another day.
That's a topic for another day. Yeah, definitely topic for another day.
My week was not about Miss Rwanda. I think my week was, one of the highlights of my week was the closure of 700 churches. And I'm told the count is still on. I think those are few.
You think more churches should be?
Yeah. So,
Really?
so some of these, especially the born-again churches, they are on the edge of notorious. And,
Especially the noise pollution from churches. This is something we need to, you come and close down a bar that is in a residential area, I understand. But churches, they're a bit lenient. I think authorities are lenient with churches that really inconvenience, residents.
I think for me, what is more interesting about this whole church closure, well, I'm a Christian, I'm a Catholic, just so that I declare. I feel that, one, it's a good move that we have government actually taking the lead in this because issues of faith are very, very difficult to regulate. And we haven't forgotten our history with the church as a country. So I think we shouldn't wait that, things get out of hand. So it is good that, you send signals, to these churches and say, hey, we are actually monitoring what's going on.
Yeah, I'll say this as well as a Christian. I'm actually Pentecostal. But it's because the role of the church in society has not been clearly defined. And what that does is it leaves a lot of room for people who have other intentions to come in and
Masqueraders.
exactly, and say we are churches, but at the end of the day, for them, they're just targeting.
Some money-making outfits.
Exactly, because it's not taxed.
You know, we'll discuss that another time.
Yeah.
We're here today to discuss about the 15th Annual Leadership Retreat that was recently concluded. And as we get into the thick of things, I'd like to start by asking you, Ephraim, a specific question. And I would like to go back to the 14th Annual Leadership Retreat last year, that out of the 26 resolutions, I want to focus on the 6th one that stated boosting local industries in a bid to reduce imports and increase exports and promote made in Rwanda products. As you know, this ties in with the East African Community's ban on second-hand clothing in a bid to revive our textile manufacturing industries. So we've been discussing Made in Rwanda campaign for a couple of years now, since its inception, as well as the EAC ban. But I'd like to just ask you, in light of all this, what is your take on the latest threats, you know, against us banning second-hand clothes? Recently concluded East African Community Heads of State Summit that happened in Kampala. You know, the US was threatening these countries in East Africa based on the fact that they were saying we are actually violating trade agreements. What's your take on this?
You remember last week we talked about the AU reform?
Yes.
And I mentioned something, and probably I said it in passing. I said that as much as we're talking about reforms or reforming our governance structures and our governments, I also talked about we need to reform our private sector. That some of these companies that are playing in our markets are foreign companies. I genuinely believe that this particular move by our governments is part of that. It's actually a push. They're trying to push, again, that boost for local industries. They're trying to push the private sector to that point where they can be self-sustaining and they can actually be self-regenerating. So now, when you think about it, and I'll go into the details a little further, but when you think about it, it may sound like I'm anti-foreign business. I do believe in globalization. But when people use trade as a tool for political acrobatics, in this case, then that's when it starts to become, it misses the point. If you're to look at the statistics, apparently only Kenya, out of all East African member states, benefited from AGOA. And the amount that of clothes so a couple of years back, and in 2014, it's now at about 300 million.
Yeah. From 2000 and in the last, basically, decade plus.
Exactly. In just 10 years, it has increased by 300%. Jobs in Kenya. The textiles industry used to employ over 500,000 Kenyans. Now it only employs about 20,000.
20,000.
And the question is, if we had capacity then, why don't we have capacity now? I mean, I think 10% of our 10% of the world's cotton comes from